Okay, we're in Andersonville, Georgia today. We're on the site of Camp Sumter. It was the largest Confederate Civil War POW camp built. The camp extended way, way out into the distance. We're going to take a look at that in a few moments. We want to talk about, obviously, the conditions. This was a very, very dark, very, very horrible place to be, obviously, but it wasn't any different than a half a dozen other northern camps. The reason why it got so much press is because the North won. This was I'm sure the rebel officers can tell you stories about Camp Johnston and Lake Erie and all the other ones that they had to deal with during the war. This was built in early 1864. It operated until the end of the war. Now we're in Andersonville, Georgia, and what that means is we are way, way, way far away from the action, from the main action. So these guys were safely ensconced here. Nobody was coming to get them. It would have taken a monumental effort of thousands of men to come down from Atlanta or wherever to get them through this countryside. Sherman and Grant made the decision not to do it because they didn't think it was worth it to save these men and sacrifice the men they would have had to have sacrificed to free these guys. So they let it go, and these conditions continued. We won't go too much into the wretchedness of it, that's public record, but suffice to say this was a horrible place, a horrifying place. A place where men preyed on each other from the same side. This was also a military installation, so we still have, which is really cool to me, remaining earthworks. These are earthworks that were built in 1864, late 1863, part of a military operation, part of protecting this camp. The only thing that remains above ground of this POW camp, well, I should say, let me rephrase that. Nothing remains from that day. The only thing that we have left is the recreation of what they call the North Gate. But if you can imagine looking out over this hill, everything as far as you can see would be one giant wall, just like this one over here, made out of pine, Georgia pine from right around the area. So we're going to go over and take a look at this. We're going to eventually take a look at the cemetery, but that's going to be in a separate piece. This is a place I've long wanted to come to, but the reasons why they built it, I was never able to make it here because it is way, way off the beaten path. We took the back roads up last night, stayed in Thomasville, and came up here this morning just for the express purpose of visiting this and the cemetery with the monuments and everything that's there. So we're saying this is the North Gate. This is where one of the areas they would have come in. They would have been entered into. You would have, as a prisoner, you would have been just ushered in. They would open the gates, you'd be shoved in, the gates would close, and you'd be left to your own devices. And you'd be at the mercy of all the other prisoners in there. Now, ostensibly, there would be some sort of military hierarchy, and to a degree, I'm sure there was, but there was an awful lot of predatory activity taking place. Watch here, this is your step there. A nice recreation of the lookout tower. They have what they call a deadline, and it's where the term actually comes from. Not just as prison, but it came from the Civil War, but it was a deadline, and it was a line that extended out from the wall inward to the prison. You were not allowed to cross the deadline. It was marked by a rope. And it was, I don't know, 10 or 20 feet from the prison walls. But the idea was, number one, you weren't supposed to get so close to the walls that a guard couldn't see what you were doing. And number two, you couldn't get so close to the walls that you could start digging out from under them or digging through them or whatever. So it was literally a deadline. If you crossed it, you weren't given any warning, you knew you weren't supposed to be across it. If you crossed it, they just shot you. And buried you right over here somewhere in an unmarked grave. Stockade is an accurate reconstruction archaeologist. He excavated stumps here that showed the size and spacing of stockade logs. They were able to map the location of each stockade post from the change in soil color produced by the rotting wood. That's why I said earlier there's nothing above ground. There's got to be countless below ground posts, the remains of posts that would have rotted and fallen down on top, but at the bottom it would you'd still find them if you went through this. But this is a sacred site, so you don't just go, archaeologists aren't going to just go digging around. This is amazing. I mean, obviously it wouldn't have been this nicely done. This is a little more milled than these are basically telephone poles, but get a really good idea. As a prisoner, you're not going through that. You're not going over it. You're not going under it or around it. You're going to stay there. You're in. Runs or not to this day, but there was a spring, and I mean not a spring, a river, a creek that ran through the middle that provided their water. So they were thrown food in, and left to their own devices. Oh, here we go. Here's the deadline. They left it. Did right here. This is the distance. This is no man's land. Did not come into here. So if it did, one of these guys would shoot you down right then and there. And then a bunch of guys would come in and drag your body away. You just didn't cross the line. Go up here and get a little bit of an idea of severe rudimentary. Part of the reason why the conditions were so horrible here was because this was the Confederacy in February of '64. This was a time when Grant and Sherman were strangling the Confederacy, and they had very few resources left. So the resources they did have were not spent on prisoners. They were spent on their own men fighting at the front lines. So these guys here, they didn't have tents, they didn't have cabins or anything else. They had little canvas. Basically, and most of what they brought in on their back. This is something like the average federal soldier would have been issued just to carry on his back, and he and his partner would have had one of these each, and then together they would have joined these together at the end of the night to create one tent. Either tied together. I don't see any grommets in these, but here's some grommets here. But they would have tied these together. They were like one half of a tent, two guys. Of course, if one of the guys dropped, the other guy took the rest of his tent. So anyway, most of what is here, they came in with. This is the conditions they had to live in. This is South Georgia through the summer, and it's unimaginably hot and humid. Unimaginably. This is a nice little recreation of what it would have looked like. And this would have been filled with men, not just a dude here and a dude there and a dude over there. This was filled wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder, with guys milling about, having nothing to do all day long except starve to death. And starve to death they did by the hundreds. Here's a nice little piece of India rubber, essentially a raincoat. That guy would have been considered the king of the walk right there. Historic well, maybe that's your well, babe. You're telling about that Providence well that you heard
Providence Spring.
Right, okay.
Historic well.
And this, we're going to take a shot of this because this is a photograph from the time period, August 64. So it shows you, it gives you a really good idea of the conditions in that part of the camp. It's amazing how close they were together and how many of them there were. These, we go down over here, we show the posts, the white posts sticking up, look like 4x4s maybe. That is the line of the original fence, and we have the same thing over here.
And there's another pillar of, or a little.
Yeah, a little marker thingy. There's another one over there. There's one over there too. We're just gonna finish this part of this video up by going over here and looking over the hill. This is where the creek ran through. I forget what they called it. I mean, there was obviously a name for it, but I forget what it was. But it barely trickled. So the prisoners would put their waste in there. So as you can imagine, it was a fetid, putrid, disgusting place. Warmed up considerably. My head's not even cold. I'm not sure exactly what's up here. Over there, but these are monument markers by all the northern states. That's what happens when you win. You get to put great big pieces of markers on the ground.
Ouch!
All right. Did you hit your wound?
Sticker.
Oh. So every area, every bit of this area, and as far as you can see, would have been dirt. So Georgia clay. this excuse me, prisoner of war camp. We're in deep southwest Georgia, not far from northern Florida, very close to southeastern Alabama. This was essentially the heart of the Confederacy. These people here would have sent their sons, husbands, fathers, uncles off to
Brothers.
fight the northern aggressor. This was not considered as it is now that this was a necessity. At this time, this was very real to these people, and they were defending their homes against their mortal enemy. This was not to them a fight to free slaves or any of that other stuff. It was a fight against their way of life, against their homes, an invasion of their homes. So they would have had, the surrounding people here would have had very little sympathy for the men inside this camp who would have directly represented that oppression and that aggression. So we try to get an idea for history as it happened at the time that it happened. Contemporary history, not revisionist history, not how we want to look at it now, but how it actually was looked at and how it actually occurred at the time, which is the truth of the events that make up history. We're gonna, cemetery's over there, we're gonna get back in the vehicle and ride around. This is part of another reconstruction, just to give you an idea of the breadth of this thing, the sheer gravity of this thing. It's enormous. And so for now, we're just gonna cut it off and go try to find a cemetery, go check out these monuments, and get you into some better shoes. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was gonna be all this. So, okay, from Georgia, we're out.